Hello everybody, Dokkan Assets here. Today we are back with another animation analysis video, continuing our journey through the animation legendary, might I add, animation carnival, leading up to the essays of Metal Cooler and Super Saiyan Goku and Vegeta. Of course, we're taking a look at the recently easy-aid STR NAMEK Goku. This guy is a absolute classic in terms of unit and the animation department. So as per usual, we're going to take a look at our man in the full view, going through them one time, and then we will take it through the slow-mo with the frame by frame. Now, I will say, this guy definitely has aged a little bit in terms of the animations. That is pretty plain to see. There are some easy things in these animations that are definitely a little bit off-looking. However, a lot of stuff in here I think has aged quite well, especially this super attack right here. I still think that this one can compete with a lot of the super attacks of today, right? They do a lot of great stuff to sort of mask the in-between parts, and a lot of the animation is definitely very sort of early what we are at today, right? I do think it is still a very good representation, though, of the entirety of the character. And it helps that my man has so many animations to his name. I remember this was one of the first units when, you know, you're data mining it and taking a look at it and looking at all the SA assets and, of course, looking at all the effects and stuff like that. You're like, bro, how many animations does this guy have? Because obviously with the regular super, the transformation, the active skill, the rage, all that stuff, he has a plethora of animations to his name. So let's go ahead and take a look at them all here. So of course, for our first animation here, we have the funny spirit bomb in base form. First of all, I have to say, I have always really liked this shot panning up on Goku. Obviously, this is a stale PNG, but obviously for the time they didn't have the minuscule movement. Oh, by the way, speaking of the time, I should definitely mention this, and I also have it pulled up here. Keep in mind, this unit was released May 2019, so of course we're not going to be judging this unit as harshly or with the same criticisms necessarily as we would judge a unit that came out today, because obviously animations were different back in 2019 than they are in 2022. So obviously here, Goku's hair probably would have moved a little bit, and maybe the rips on his clothes and stuff like that would have been moving. But man, I really like the aura here. I think the aura looks absolutely fantastic, and I think they nailed it. It is literally just some PNGs fading into one another, but I actually think in full practice, it looks absolutely fantastic for sure. I think they did a very, very good job with it. So of course, then we have a cut to Goku holding up the Spirit Bomb. The cut, I feel like, honestly, and obviously the frame by frame looks a little bit off, but I think in the actual practice it doesn't, because they do a good job here of keeping your attention on Goku's pose, right? Obviously, because he's posed like this, you're kind of having in your mind, okay, this is how he is at this current time, right? And so I'm grateful that they didn't change the pose on you real quick, because I know some modern animations do that where they jump cut to the next scene, but this still feels like it's a part of the same scene, so I feel like the jump cut works pretty well, right? Also, interestingly enough, I think it's just because this asset is on the screen so quickly, right? It disappears to focus up on the spirit bomb in the sky. This asset of Goku is kind of lower quality than everything else in his animations, which is kind of interesting. Those thick black lines, and it almost looks a little bit more like a story asset. But I think, again, that's just because this is sort of an in-between shot. Again, though, the aura does look really, really nice for sure. So then, of course, you pan up to the Spirit Bomb in the sky. And I have to say, I was always impressed with how the Spirit Bomb looked. I love those anime lines to sort of focus on it. Obviously, if it's getting bigger, or as it's getting bigger, excuse me. I think they nailed the look of the Spirit Bomb to the T, right? For sure. Like, this looks exactly how it looks like in the anime. I remember thinking that too when this animation dropped. I was like, hey, yo, hold on. That looks exactly how it does in the anime. So they do a very good job of capturing the Spirit Bomb's likeness as well. And, by the way, another fantastic way to transition between assets here, because obviously now we pan back down, and this is a much higher quality asset of Goku here, right? Obviously, we have the kind of one that we were talking about before where it's a little bit lower quality, but they have it pan up to the Spirit Bomb, right? And then, when they pan back down to Goku, it's this nice high-quality asset. Definitely a very cool way to do things, for sure, right? I like when essays take a little bit more of an abstract approach to transitioning between scenes and assets, because it makes it just feel a lot more enjoyable than jump cutting between scenes, and obviously it makes it feel a lot of bit more cohesive is what I meant to say. So moving on, right? We have Goku obviously standing there screaming up to the heavens. Sorry, I didn't mean to make it full screen on you. The white flash to the card art, of course. And then we have the throwdown, which this scene I always thought was pretty cool. How they have it sort of revolve around Goku, right, as he throws the Spirit Bomb down. Obviously, with the way that modern Dokkan animations are, I could definitely see if this came out today, they would have some nice rotoscoping on this, basically giving it the effect of it was 3D rather than fading in between these different assets, right? It doesn't look too bad, and it definitely fits for the time. However, I think some of these shots you can definitely tell when you're watching the animations. You're like, oh boy, that's a transition if I've ever seen one. Like, this one is pretty drastic between those two shots. And funny enough, Goku transitions very quickly to the throw. It is only a couple of frames, basically, to him throwing the actual ball. You have his hands in the air, and one little one where his hands are now sort of flat, and then immediately forward. By the way, this asset, I don't think I've ever really taken a look at this in fine detail. This is a very nice Goku shot right here. That looks great, if I do say so myself. Very, very cool. It looks fantastic. So they have the zoom in on it, and this is a very interesting way of doing this too. So they zoom in on it and have it sort of fly off screen, where they have these anime motion lines sort of cover the screen. And then, right, obviously we have the transition to the asset of Goku, quote unquote, throwing the ball, right, which is just the PNG. Again, I think this is a nice way to sort of work around the fact that they don't have the, you know, animation prowess at this time to make Goku fully throw the ball. Or maybe they do, because in some of these other shots it kind of looks like they could have done it, but of course, you know, we're taking into consideration when these units came out. So, you know, it's a good way to work around that sort of thing, I feel like, for sure. Then obviously we have the Spirit Bomb, which looks fantastic, if I do say so myself. Again, I think they absolutely nailed it on the look. Even as it approaches Frieza, again, looks fantastic. The blue light covering the background. We have sort of a basic Dokkan explosion here, but that is sort of just the in-between for the explosion when the Spirit Bomb actually hits Planet Namek. And that shot looks really nice too, with obviously the Spirit Bomb colliding with Namek. I think that they've always done a pretty good job on the space aesthetic shots, I guess you would say. I know this sounds a little bit weird to say, but whenever they've done a shot where it's like a planet above, right, or a planet in the frame, and then obviously just space around it, I think they always nail it. At least for me personally, every time that I've seen them do an animation like that, I've always been like, wow, that looks pretty good. Even in the earlier days of Dokkan animations, I still think that the planet shots have always looked pretty good. And this one definitely does not disappoint whatsoever. Alright, so we transition into the transformation. Oh my gosh. I remember the first time I saw this animation when this got dropped, I was losing my mind, bro. So let's go ahead and take a look at this. Obviously, as this shot starts, we have the anime motion lines. We have the electricity slamming down in the background. We have Goku hitting the... Looks super sick. Obviously, the lighting from the storm coming in from Goku transforming. Very, very nice touch. We have this super big shot of lightning strike right down behind Goku. And what's cool is that even though this asset just fades in, I think this looks really, really nice. And they sort of divert your attention from the fact that this basically just faded in with this huge lightning strike here. I think they do a really, really good job of constructing this SA, because now, obviously, we have the Dokkan face cut in, which, of course, the transformation animation has to have in this style, because that's how the old transformation animations looked. Goku's face here and this asset, I kind of wish this big line wasn't in the way, because, man, this looks so good, right? I love the shading here, because obviously you have this harsh light slamming down behind Goku, so of course the front of his body would be a lot darker because of the way that the lighting is. It looks fantastic, and I think they nailed it here. So we have a cut to Goku, of course, raging out, which it is a kind of a shame, again, that they have to do this for the transformation, because that's just how the game is constructed, right? That's just how transformation animations work. But gosh darn it, I kind of wish they did it so you could see this animation in its full glory, right? But regardless, though, thankfully it disappears pretty quickly. And obviously with this whole animation, right, taking a look in the background, Goku looks really good as he actually lifts his head up, right? Unfortunately, they do sort of just fade in between the different hair pieces, right? You can see it goes into the in-between Super Saiyan and base form, and then the Super Saiyan but base form, which, by the way, I am a sucker for this look. I think it looks super cool. But obviously then we have the fades to the Super Saiyan hair, which, here's the thing, right? With the hair fluttering up and beginning to take form in the Super Saiyan form, I think that obviously if this animation was sort of modernized, it wouldn't be the fade in between the different black hair assets, because obviously they have the assets that would allow the hair to look like it's raising up and actually taking form to that Super Saiyan shape, right? Obviously for this time, it makes sense that it looks like this. However, I do think that this fading in and out actually works perfectly, because it's basically just like the anime, right? In this scene, obviously Goku is struggling really hard and is about to turn Super Saiyan, right? So I think this shot right here, even with the lighting sort of changing too, works really well to sort of emphasize, right, the struggle and the imminent change that's about to happen. I think they did a really good job with that shot. The rocks as well floating here too also look really, really good. And it's cool that in the shot where he transforms into Super Saiyan 2, you can sort of see the little bit of ki forming there as well. Looks very nice. Obviously, it sort of fades back onto base form Goku's hair. And then we have this wonderful shot here, where it's also interesting to me that they did this way, right? For Goku opening his mouth here, they have this shot where it fades in, but it's like kind of not there. Like this in between looks very strange, right? And then obviously we have the twip, right? Goku's eyes turn to white. And of course, the transition into, that looks so weird in base form. I've never looked at that in base form before. Into the Super Saiyan look, which I think they nailed this whole section. Again, I think if this was more of a modern essay, you would have a proper face transition, right? But I think even for when this came out, right, if we take a look at the normal speed, it still looks really good, right? His whole sort of transition from the gritting teeth face in base to this looks great. Funny enough, now that I'm looking at that initial part where they have the asset behind Goku's face, it almost kind of looks like an error. Like, I wonder if it was supposed to be in front or something like that. But regardless, though, overall, I think the shot still looks really nice, because again, we're looking at this in the frame by frame, but you have to keep in mind how this looks in the full motion, right? We have the nice fade to yellow, and oh man, for just a PNG standing there, ladies and gentlemen, this shot looks so good. I think they nailed it with this. The aura looks super cool. I love the glowy effect that they have on it. And obviously just the simple zoom in to the very, very nice Goku asset, I think looks super good. This was definitely something that I feel like tied the entire transformation together. I think they did a really good job. And the anime motion lines are a nice touch as well. Alright, so of course we have the fade to white, and now we have the first super attack. So this Goku, this Goku asset always looked kind of funny to me. I always thought that the shading was very interesting because I feel like it doesn't match the rest of this animation. Goku's mouth also just is an oval, basically. I don't know. Looks a little bit silly. It kind of looks like it's from a different game, if I'm being honest with you. But it is a pretty good shot, him looking there, of course. It is nice that they have these super cool impact frames here for him powering up with the aura. I quite like that a lot. Obviously, it's very hard to look at just in the slow-mo, but it's cool that they have the lines there as well of sort of the ki erupting around him before they have the aura. And I have to say, the aura in this shot looks really, really good. Looks super nice, and they absolutely nailed the difference in the hair color here, right? Because obviously, when he isn't having the aura sort of surround him, he had this very yellowish white, almost like cheddar cheese color hair for Goku here. And then, of course, when he is enveloped in the aura, it's a little bit more of that golden color. So they definitely nailed that for sure. So interestingly enough, we have a fade to black and then into the card art. I can't really think of when they do that too often, honestly. I can't really think of an essay off the top of my head. We fade back in, and oh my gosh, ladies and gentlemen, I remember the first time I saw this one too. I was like, hey, yo, how did they get better than the transformation animation? Because this was one of the first times I remember I saw this, and I was like, that's just the anime. It looks exactly like the anime. The art style is so perfect, right? And I love this sort of like fade in and out to the different scenes, right? Goku's hands look really good as he's winding up for the Kamehameha there, and he puts them together, right? We have a very cool perspective shot as well. I really like this scene a lot, right? And we have another thing with the fade here, right? It's almost like they're fading in and out of the scene. It kind of reminds me of like the intro to Kingdom Hearts or something like that. I feel like When You Walk Away should be playing right now. But yeah, this shot looks really good. The aura as well surrounding his hands, I always thought that looked very, very nice. And this is just a super cool perspective shot, right? I really like it when Dokkan does these very unique perspective changes where they have it sort of zoom into his hands for this one particularly, and then zoom out, right? And obviously you can see that it is Goku pulling the Kamehameha. Such a nice transition, and I much prefer when they do stuff like this because it's a lot more interesting for sure. Obviously, Goku in the background looks really good. The aura looks super nice. They also did a interesting thing here where they sort of made the background a little bit more blurrier than the actual hands to sort of give you a little bit more perspective, right? Obviously, the hands, you can tell. Look at the quality difference here, right? This isn't just the video. Obviously, the video is a little bit stinky quality because, of course, you know, you just have to yoink it from Twitter, basically. But with the aura surrounding it here, right, it's a little bit more crispy, and this is like good kind of crispy, right? This looks a lot more high quality, but it's cool because obviously it sort of emphasizes the way that you're looking at this, right? Obviously Goku's hands are closer to the camera, and that's what they want you to focus on, so they blur the background a little bit, which is super cool. Obviously, we have Goku wind up to the back here. This shot, again, looks super, super clean. This looks like it's right out of the anime. I really, really like this shot here. They have the cut to behind Goku, which normally I would be like, oh, you know, maybe they could do something wrapping around him. But honestly, for this, I kind of didn't think that it looked that bad, honestly. This cut seems pretty natural to me in the grand flow of things. The only thing about this animation that I think is kind of right, is that I think that the actual key ball, when it forms in his hands for the Kamehameha, looks really good, right? It looks a lot more natural than just a simple Dokkan Circle asset. However, when they have the beams come out, it looks a little cheesy, I'm not gonna lie. I think it kind of reminds you of like some old Power Rangers effects, right? When they're spinning around like this, they don't look too bad for sure, right? I think they could definitely be a little bit better. They still do feel a little bit cheesy, but having them sort of grow out of the ball definitely looks a little bit weird in the full motion. Let me show you that real quick. When I was rewatching these to do this video too, I kind of felt like that, right? Like the form is cool, but then how they go out feels a little bit like not as natural, I guess. It almost feels like it's automated or like done by a robot, which is kind of weird. Like, see, yeah, the lines going around look just fine. I don't know. Very interesting. Let me know what you think of that in the comment section below. Always like hearing what you guys have to say about this type of thing. Okay, so now we have a jump cut to Goku's face, which this shot is super sick, dude. I really like the way that they sort of emphasize how intense this is by having Goku sort of look through the Kamehameha beams. Again, his facial expression here on point. The style of this animation on point. And here, I feel like the beam effects look really good because it's almost like they're struggling to escape from his hands, right? Which is perfect because obviously that's exactly how this scene looks, right? Again, a really cool transition here. Not just a very nice use of lighting effects, obviously, as you get closer, you can see the blue glow sort of cover Goku. But you can see, right, that as they zoom into the Kamehameha, they use it as a way to mask the transition to this scene where Goku is then pushing the Kamehameha forward, which also looks really, really nice. And again, they sort of zoom in and have a flash until they go to this animation, which of course is a very iconic scene for Namek Goku of him pushing the Kamehameha. And this looks fantastic, right? With all the blues and whatnot, the different angles going on here, the perspectives, right? Obviously going from Goku's face to then, you know, they have a little zoom in to his mouth to then going back to his hands, right? Funny enough, we talked about Full Par Frieza yesterday, that he had a shot where it zoomed in and then zoomed out. I guess they could have done it where they zoomed in and then zoomed out, rather. If you watch that video, you'll know what I'm talking about, because they did it with Namek Goku here. But such a cool perspective shot here, even though obviously this is just a stale PNG, right? It's not moving or anything like that. The effects around it definitely disguise that, and this feels very lifelike to me, despite just being, you know, Goku standing there, basically. And I think they do a good job of emphasizing this, too, with not only just the lines emphasizing the Kamehameha flying forward, because, of course, we're kind of inside of it right now. But Goku's hand sort of pulsating like that really makes you feel like he's pushing the Kamehameha, not like literally pushing it forward, but, you know, firing it forward, right? This shot is so good, and I love this zoom out too. Again, they mask it with the, you know, part where it would maybe look a little bit awkward by having that white flash there. But yeah, I think this looks so good, right? It sort of reminds me in a movie where they go, right? And they have the zoom out shot. So good, dude. So good. Like, this section right here could easily pass for a modern animation. As a matter of fact, honestly, I kind of think that if this guy came out with these animations as a modern day unfeatured banner unit, like with this essay specifically, right, we're talking about, I feel like nobody would bat an eye, because it still looks really, really good, if I do say so myself. The Kamehameha, obviously flying forward, looks good. Of course, a very nice background to boot. And this is a pretty cool shot. Obviously, we have the Kamehameha envelop the enemy here, and quite literally envelop the enemy here, right? Because obviously you can see when the sprite gets hit, right, it sort of impacts them, which is cool that they even bother to animate that, because it could have just enveloped them in the white light. And then you have them in there before they sort of fade away into the Kamehameha. A very interesting perspective as well, sort of looking from the side of the Kamehameha for this shot. Very cool, though. Okay, so now we move on to the active skill here. Oh boy, so this one always bothered me a little bit. Just this animation in the beginning of Goku closing his hand, right? It's weird because they do a frame, but they also fade it just a little bit, right? So keep your eyes on how this looks, right? When we go to the next frame, you can see that that little bit right there is actually Goku's finger. And you would think, oh, maybe it's just a cloud. No, you can see that, right, even there's the other edge of his finger, how it was before, right? And then when they fade into this shot, right, you can see that little bit. Now, that's not the part that bothers me. It's just that it's such a quick transition between his hands. Again, I feel like if this was more of an updated essay, they would definitely have the closing of the fist be a lot more lifelike. But because this is so old, they just have the quick yoink, yoink. Doesn't look too bad, though. And everything that follows up this animation, I think, looks really good, right? We have the very, very nice looking aura. Unfortunately, kind of cut through by Goku's cut in there. But thankfully, they don't linger on it for too long. This bulk up of Goku's muscles as well looks very, very nice, if I do say so myself, right? This shot always kind of impressed me with how well they have this look. And again, a very nice transition shot, even though they have this sort of white fade here, right? I like that they zoom into his hand because it's just a little bit more unique. And I feel like it emphasizes the fact that, hey, Goku's getting strong. He's powering up, right? Then, of course, we have Goku with his hands in the air, which this shot does look really good. The one thing I will say about this in particular, before Goku's hair transitions into that more golden look, is that I do feel like the hair here is not shaded correctly. It kind of feels out of place on top of the rest of this, because obviously Goku looks super shaded, very detailed here, and the hair is just very plain. It almost feels like someone made the entire art piece and then left the sketch part on the hair, right? I understand that when the cheddar cheese, I guess we'll just call it, like, color of Goku's hair is on screen, it is a lot more simplistic than the golden, because the golden has a lot more detail to it. But this still does feel a little bit out of place, for sure. Obviously, we have Goku move his hands up and his arms up. Then, of course, giving us the famous squat pose. See, look how much more detailed. We have to let the explosion effect play. We'll talk about that in a second. Look how much more detailed the golden hair here looks compared to just a moment before. Like, it feels like it's a composite piece now, right? I always did find this shot really cool because, again, this sort of feels like a precursor to some of the modern Dokkan animations with having a little bit more movement in them, right? With authentic movement where it's these different pieces moving to sort of give you the illusion of the character actually moving. Now, of course, we have a very, very interesting transition to Goku hitting the "let's go" pose, of course. The ki becomes a lot more intense. I don't know how I feel about the transition. Again, I think because of the time that it came out, it's fine. It's excusable, right? I still feel like they maybe could have had a couple of in-between frames, especially with the way that they've done some of the other animations where they're able to mask it. Maybe it's just because this is just, that's all that they could do or think of, which, I mean, that part is fine, but when it goes to this part, oh man, I really enjoyed this part a lot. Because obviously they really emphasize how crazy Goku's going here, right? With these insane faded assets, right? Look at this cluster mess on the screen right now, right? Obviously, with the assets sort of fading off of him too, I think it's a great emphasis of the intensity of the power-up here, right? We obviously have a super sick aura effect as well around Goku, which I think looks very, very nice. We have these pieces of ki and energy flying in the background too, which also look great with the anime motion lines as well, emphasizing this. I always did find it kind of funny that Goku got a little bit smaller, right? As we look at this, he sort of fades a little bit back into the background. Not fades, but just like moves into the background, which I thought was a little bit interesting. But yeah, very cool animation. I think it's just simple, clean, and it works very well for what it is, because obviously the transformation should be the animation that's a little bit longer, but obviously this just going into a rage mode. It's quick, it's snappy, it's a couple seconds of animation, and I think they did a very good job with it for sure. Okay, so now we move into this super attack, and keep in mind, Goku has 2 essays in the rage mode. Like I said, this guy has a lot of animations under his belt, right? So, we have Goku standing up on the mountain here to start us off. They literally just use the sprite for this one. Like, this is quite literally just the Goku sprite with a little bit nice aura, right? And I mean, I guess it makes sense because obviously he's just squatting in the background, so they don't have to make it anything too crazy. Here is when it transitions to an actual asset from the super attack. Well, I mean, they're all in the super attack, but you know what I mean. Like, these are just already pre-existing assets from the sprites that they use for this. And then obviously once we have Goku jumping off, I think that looks a lot more natural. It's kind of weird that he's not just facing backwards already and they have him turn around really quickly like that, but when you're watching, I don't think you really think about that too in depth. The rock explosion effect is weird that they sort of fade in between that, right? I feel like by this time they had it a little bit better than that, but maybe I'm just not remembering as much. Definitely they improve. I think this still looks really good in the individual sections that are here, but the fades between them do look a little bit off for sure. Also, a very quick transition to the card art here for sure. It comes in very quickly for this one. So moving past that, obviously we have this very, very nice shot of Goku flying in here, which I think looks really nice. It's cool that they also transition his arms a little bit because it feels a little bit more natural with him flying in, right? You can see his aura begins to come into frame, and he moves his arms to the side too, which looks really, really nice. Again, the nice emphasis of a character flying by having them zoom in, and the ki as well with the anime motion lines too. That looks really, really great. We have Goku fly towards the screen, which is interesting. Then they cut to a shot of him sort of backwards again. I found that interesting, especially since before we just saw when he's firing off the Kamehameha, they like have it zoomed out, then zoom in, then zoom out again. I don't know. Very interesting that they decided to do it this way. But we have Goku come up on Frieza, and the quick punch is thrown, which looks really, really good. a very nice little impact effect as well to sort of give this punch a little bit more oomph. I think they absolutely turn it in the correct spot too. Just a very quick sort of whack right across the head, right? Then, of course, we have the enemy fly away with a very nice shot of perspective, too. It's almost like someone dropped the camera in the rocks on NAMEK. But we're not done with this shot yet. We have Goku land down and jump up for the for the dunk, it seems. Very, very cool. I really like this shot a lot. Obviously, it feels a lot more like a transition, right? Again, this is just one PNG to another PNG to another one. But of course, again, this is the 2019 Dokkan animations we're looking at. So it makes sense that it looks like this. But I still think it looks pretty good. They use the movement pretty well. They use changing the size of the assets very well. Obviously, the aura kind of helps distract you from that fact. We have a very nice effect of the rocks sort of breaking apart a little bit as Goku jumps here. And this shot looks really good with him flying forward too. It looks so goofy. That's not because of the animation itself. That's obviously just because the pose from this angle just looks very funny, right? Obviously, then, we transition into Goku above Frieza. With this shot, the shading is very interesting, right? I feel like there's a couple of shots in this essay where they're stylized like this, and there's some that are a little bit more closer to the anime. Like, funny enough, this sort of asset style reminds me of this Goku, right, that we were looking at in the previous Super Attack. It's kind of, like, styled the same way, I feel like. Either way, though, we have Goku whap Frieza real quick with a slam down, right? You can kind of see that they do the fade a little bit because you can see the outline of Goku's arms there and a little bit of his body still remains there, right, where his legs were before. But obviously, when this is moving so quick, you don't really notice it. The impact is really good. And obviously, we have Frieza fly towards the land below with, interestingly enough, they don't actually have the payoff here in this section of the animation. When they jump cut to the next section, right, then that's when he hits the ground, which I think is pretty interesting. Obviously, we have the rocks and debris flying away. I do like that they sort of have them come by the camera. Again, it provides a little bit of nice perspective. I do think the rock movement definitely doesn't feel as natural as modern day essays, right? They definitely got it a little bit more down with more new essays, how the rocks would move, rather than just sort of shooting out in all directions from the actual, like, dust cloud, right? We also have this interesting thing where the dust cloud doesn't grow as naturally, right? It's like boom, 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 boom. It kind of reminds me of Frieza's super attack here, where it's like bigger, bigger, bigger. But yeah, overall, very nice shot, and it's cool that they linger on Goku flying there in the air, obviously just with his arms down after finishing the attack. Okay, so we have our final animation here. Let's take a drink of water as we're transitioning between. And we have, oh man, okay. So this essay is so sick, dude. First of all, I really like the style of the aura here. I feel like the aura looks a little bit different than it has for the rest of these animations. I don't think that's a bad thing. It does make it feel a little bit less coherent with the rest of this, I suppose, but I really, really enjoy the look of this. I think it looks just, I don't know, besides looking unique, it feels a lot more like Goku's glowing rather than ki. It's a little bit different of a look for sure, but I think it works pretty well for this scene. Okay, so I popped off the first time I saw this animation for sure. So this is super sick. I don't want to call this rotoscoping because obviously they're not making a like specific asset look like it's in 3D. Because obviously they're not focusing on Goku in the frame for this entire transition. However, the way that they frame the shot, right? The camera angles where they have the characters move to the side and the way that they move the landscape in the background as well as the sky assets give you this illusion like the camera is turning around and you're now looking behind Goku, right? With the resources they had at the time, that is such a cool way to give you a 3D effect, right? Again, it's all trickery of the mind. It's all just the way that they use the assets to make it appear that way. Because, of course, literally the PNGs that are at play here are just Goku looking at Frieza from, you can see his front of his body, right? And you can see the back of Frieza's body looking at Goku. And it goes to this shot where now you can see Goku, well, not really his back, but like the side of Goku, right, looking at Frieza. And now you can see the front of Frieza. Such a cool way to give a 3D effect for an animation. As well, Goku's ki, like I said here, also looks really, really cool. It's a lot more unique than the other sort of ways that they do the aura, right? It feels like a lot more of like energy flowing around him almost. And I think they do a very good way of animating it here. Like, it's very subtle, but it's very nice. Obviously, we have the attack where Goku pushes Frieza with just a bit of force here, right? And I like that they also animate Goku's hair. It isn't really like fluttering in the wind, but they do sort of give you that effect like this is a lot more impactful, because obviously his hair is the standard look here, and then they transition into it being pushed back, which makes sense if obviously a bunch of wind is pushing forward towards Frieza. As well, obviously we have the Obi belt actually move a little bit, which is cool to again emphasize the sort of intense movement here that this animation has. Now, interestingly enough, all of these other animations had some really nice fade effects, but this just it just cuts right in to his card art, which is interesting. I can't really recall a animation that I've seen in doing these animation analysis videos where Goku quite literally just pop, he's on the screen. I don't know, very weird way to transition into it. I don't think it's too bad, because even in like the full motion, let's take a look at this actually in the full motion just as we see the transition as well. Whoop. Yeah, it's not too off-putting, right? It definitely feels a lot more natural. By the way, again, look at that. Oh, so good. Yeah, this doesn't feel like it's too crazy of a cut-in, even though it definitely is a little bit interesting that they don't have a sort of like in-between fade for that, for sure. All right, so now we transition. Oh, I love this shot so much, dude. It's so good. This looks just like the anime in my opinion as well, even though again this is just a non-moving PNG. Instead of saying stale PNG, I should say static PNG, because that fits a little bit more. When I mean stale, I don't mean bad looking. I mean it's not moving, right? The PNG is just a PNG. They do a good job of making you feel like he's moving though, obviously with the background lines as well as the aura sort of flooding forward over Goku. Obviously we have this begin to not really teleport away, because obviously it's just Goku moving super fast. He's not doing the instant transmission, of course, because he doesn't know it yet. But this shot looks super sick. I think they nailed Goku's look as well, and I really like the colors that they use for the lines where Goku's sort of disappearing here. I think they look fantastic, and obviously coloring them that way is a lot cooler than just having the white lines. It makes it feel a lot more like not only is it specifically made for this character, but the character's moving super fast, right? I really, really like that look a lot. Obviously, we then have Goku come back into frame to hit Frieza. This shot, I will say, is a little bit weird, because obviously with the sprites, and again, this is more of an L for the sprites and the animation, but Goku is so much bigger than Frieza here. I know Frieza is a small guy, right? Excuse me. But he's really small here. Very tiny boy. Very tiny boy. But again, that's just because of the way that the sprites work. Anyway, it is interesting that they have Goku get a little bit bigger here for this shot too. This is to sort of emphasize the impact, right? You have the little bit of an effect there, but also as they zoom in and shake the screen, you know, it makes the punch feel a little bit more impactful. Goku is also very interestingly animated here. Like, I feel like he looks kind of normal, but the little bit of a thicker black line around the outside, I feel like they could have made it a little bit thinner for this. Okay, so we have, whoa. What is this transition with the enemy sprite? Is it because they wanted you to like feel like he's flying away more? I don't know. It's very interesting that they transition between those like that. Obviously, we have Frieza fly away though in a very cool perspective as well, with the planet sort of not really rotating, but the background rotating to sort of give you that effect like he's flying away. And a very cool shot of perspective. Goku's arm looks really weird there. That's not how arms bend, is it? I guess you can kind of bend your arm like that. I don't know. It still looks a little bit awkward. But obviously it's on screen for so short that you don't really notice that. And again, oh yeah, definitely the arm is bending a little bit too far back for that for sure. But it's a very cool shot of perspective here, right? And obviously you can actually see Goku's arm moving, right? That asset before it comes into a little bit more of a natural pose. And what's interesting is that they do a fade here, which it's a lot harder to tell because obviously in the full motion of this and how far away it is, right? But they transition into this, and I always really like this Goku asset in particular. I don't know why, but I just do. With him flying forward now, and it's a little bit more, funny enough, shaded than the other shot was going in, which is interesting. But yeah, they do a good job of making you feel like Goku's actually moving forward and winding up for the punch with the way that they do that simple asset transition. So then we have Goku eventually cut into Frieza, right, where he throws the punch against him. And at the beginning, it looks a little bit weird, but when this is in the full animation, of course, the follow-through makes this look very, very nice. Obviously, the speed lines all over Goku also help make this punch feel a lot more impactful, too. We have Frieza fly up into the sky, and of course, ooh, this shot is so raw, dude. I remember seeing this, and I was like, oh, that's a nice looking shot right there, ladies and gentlemen. It looks so, so cool. I really, really like this. I think, again, even though this is just a simple PNG, and with the modern day animations, the hair would definitely be fluttering around, the Obi belt would be fluttering around, maybe the damage on his pants. It still looks really nice, and they do a lot to sort of emphasize the movement there. This is cool because it feels like Frieza's speeding up a little bit, and we have Goku... This pose looks very funny. We have Goku fly into the frame and ram into Frieza, taking him out of the frame before we have Goku fly up to the sky. And of course, get ready to fire the Kamehameha. And oh man, so this shot right here is kind of like, I don't want to call it bootleg rotoscoping because that's not true, but it's almost like a precursor to it, trying to make it feel like it's a 3D animation, right? Because they sort of rotate around Goku's face, right? Until they get to this expression. This expression right now is peak Goku, by the way. And then they fade into a little bit of a stinkier asset because obviously it's going to be a little bit farther away. I sound like Porky Pig there for a second. It's a little bit farther away, so of course they're going to use a little bit of a lower quality one because, you know, they don't need to use the high quality one. And again, they do a good job of masking the asset transition here. It does feel a little bit jarring in the full animation, I will admit, but at least they sort of do their best to sort of have the, like, case not just be bam bam PNG to PNG, where they have the white flash and obviously they Kamehameha flying forward. The ki looks good, the ki around Goku looks good, and a very cool perspective shot, again, where they have Goku sort of zoom out, and then he's attacking Frieza, and you can actually see the enemy sprite get enveloped by the energy. It is interesting that they keep the sprite in their normal color for the beginning of this, right? Like here, they're not obviously tinted blue at all, and then when they finally get down to here, they're tinted a little bit more blue. I think that's interesting considering how the other Kamehameha looked. But yeah, that is basically the end here with these nice anime speed lines and of course the whole scene being blue. And I believe the shot lingers on this before it ends. So, that is all of Goku's animations, ladies and gentlemen. Again, for a 2019 unit, I feel like this animation has a lot of super impressive stuff. And not to mention a lot of stuff that's sort of like a precursor to things that they do in the modern day of Dokkan animations. I think that even though this guy has definitely aged in some areas, and that is easy to tell, right? With some of the ways that the assets fade in between each other, and some of the ways that things don't move, and you can tell that they're just static PNGs, right? This guy would definitely be cool seeing a sort of new version of these Goku attacks. However, I still think that these hold up very well today, especially the super attacks that this guy has, right? And even the original transformation animation, right? I think all of it still looks really good, and this guy is still very much so a joy to use. He definitely reminds me a lot of that first time that I watched the Super Saiyan Goku episodes way back when I was a kiddo watching Dragon Ball Z on TV, right? It definitely gives you that sort of feeling, which I think if a Dokkan animation can do that, when it is obviously an animation that's specifically referencing scenes from the anime, I think it does a good job overall, if that's the case, right? But let me know what you think of this guy in the comment section below. I still really like this guy's animations. Obviously, I'm using him more on the regular now that he just got an easy A. But if you enjoyed, of course, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe. I hope you guys are enjoying the animation analysis videos. Obviously, we got more coming on the way to Cooler. We got one more before we get to the new big boy animation. So keep an eye out for those. Those would be fun to take a look through, of course. And now we'll catch you guys in the next one. Dokkan Assets out. Peace.